Good evening. Thank you for coming out this evening. Seeing that most of you are seated, I would like to ask you a question, an imaginary question. What if I were to tell you that there's a powerful foot trap hidden under the carpet in this auditorium? One that is bone-crushing strong, just waiting for some victim to inadvertently step at the wrong place into its jaws. Would you walk out of this auditorium just a little differently than what you walked in? Now, we need to be careful with a subject like we're looking at here this evening, because it can inspire fear. And I am concerned that we deal fairly with this subject so that fear is not the key element that you walk out of here with. And for your comfort, there is no foot trap in the floor, just for the record. There are two principles I want to give respect to before we open the subject, and the one Brother Jonathan already dealt with, which I appreciate. The first one I would like to bring to your attention are Paul's words when he tells us that God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So that's in one hand. Put that in one hand. And on the other hand, we have the verse from Jesus that was already read, when he instructs us to go forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. So how do we bring Paul's instruction to move with power, and yet Jesus' instructions recognizing the danger of our environment, and yet harmless as doves? This morning, and came upon a verse in preparation for Sunday school class there. And we were studying Numbers chapter 13, where and Joshua go with the 12 to search out the land of Canaan, as you recall. And when they came back, there was turmoil, there was division. And there was a phrase that caught my mind that I thought, that's the goal of this conversation this evening. It says that Caleb stilled the people before Moses. That's what I would like, that's my prayer for this evening, that while there are traps hidden in the floor of life, and those are real, fear is not the takeaway element. It may be the motivation, but we don't want it to be the takeaway. We operate with power and of love, and as wise as serpents and harmless as doves, but ultimately we want to still the people so that when that crazy call, that crazy email, or that unsuspecting temptation or threat, the vulnerability as was stated, is presented to us, then we are still. I invite you to consider a topic as old as Satan's conversation with Eve in the Garden of Eden, a pressing issue that affects each of us today: fraud. Fraud is the act of deceiving or misrepresenting. Fraud separates people and damages relationships. It never delivers on its promise and often leaves us feeling like Adam and Eve, shamed and alone. Modern-day fraud is but another version of the serpent's voice speaking havoc into the lives of people, even in and amongst our communities. Fraud Aware was born from the idea that our conservative communities can do better in countering fraud. In August 2020, 16 individuals from various conservative church groups gathered with a shared common burden for the tremendous loss of Christian testimony and resources through fraud. Many of these men had experience working with failed loan pools. $100 million have been lost through illegal loan pools in and amongst our conservative churches. These men saw firsthand the carnage of broken promises, failed expectations, and shattered trust. They had contributed to the thousands of hours spent helping to rebuild broken finances and damaged relationships. The question at this meeting was simple. Can a little effort spent on fraud awareness in our communities lessen the need for fraud resolution? Is it possible that education could serve as a shield against future frauds? Or, using the proverbial cliff, could a fence at the top of the cliff lessen the need for the ambulance at the bottom? The answer at this meeting was unanimous. Everyone agreed it could. It was good. We should work on it. Luke chapter 16, verse 2 gives us our theme verse where it says, "How is it that I hear this of thee? Give an account of thy stewardship." This verse is the heartbeat of our work. Fraud Aware believes we can do better. I want to give you a brief introduction to Fraud Aware. In August 2021, Fraud Aware, a small nonprofit organization, was formed to become a conservative Anabaptist resource for fraud awareness, fraud identification, education, and prevention. Fraud Aware has a 6-member operating board and currently has a 23-member advisory board. The advisory board serves as a counsel and accountability for the operating board. In short, this larger advisory board can add or take operating board members away. We are thankful for a Fraud Aware committee in Indiana. In 2024, we added a committee in Indiana charged with the responsibility of taking the message of fraud awareness to their local communities. We are currently in the early stages of communicating with another committee in Ohio, basically finding brethren that are interested in taking the message of fraud awareness to their constituencies. These are Amish, Mennonite, and Ohio Amish and Mennonite churches. And our goal, our vision, is to keep adding committees in any state where there are conservative people interested in countering the damages of fraud. Before outlining what Fraud Aware does, I think it's equally important for you to understand what Fraud Aware does not do. Fraud Aware is not investment advisors. We do not provide investment advice. I want to be clear. There are many organizations that are taking in investments and lending them back out. They are legal. They're good. There are many of them. We do not advise as to one or the other. We are also not an investment organization ourselves. We do not receive funds for the purpose of re-lending. We are not legal counsel. Fraud introduces complicated questions that often a trusted attorney can help answer. We are not that. We are not tax advisors, nor do we consult on tax-related issues. We are not the fraud police. Our mission is awareness. And then finally, we are not an ambulance for fraud victims. Typically, the local brotherhood is best suited to work with the issues that a fraud situation introduces. What does Fraud Aware do? Fraud Aware prints. We currently have over 20 pieces of literature, some of which is on the table back here. We send out a newsletter twice a year, and we're in the process of printing. And I was thinking, sometimes I wonder, how long will we have material to print? Well, Brother Jonathan mentioned that there are new scams literally by the minute. So as long as the stories come in, I think our goal is to package them and distribute them so that others are aware of what is going on. And I don't see that ending anytime soon. There will always be fresh material. Here are a few examples of our printed material. Fraud Aware publishes educational books. I'm curious, have any of you seen this book before or read this book before? Okay, a few names. This was our first book, our first effort at printing a book. And more recently, we printed a second book, The Widow Who Got Scammed. That was also distributed in 2024. And if you're interested, we do have multiple copies back here. And I want to say, feel free to clean that table up. I would be glad to head north with less literature. Feel free to help yourself, take what you want there. And if you want additional copies of these books, they are being distributed by Christian Light Publications. And you're welcome to contact them for more. Fraud Aware presents. Last year, Fraud Aware presented at over 30 educational or business-related events where conservative people were strongly represented. We started a listen library in 2024, about 8 months, where callers can call in and listen to educational fraud stories. At last measure, this line has 2,895 hours of listening time, coming from a little over 5,000 different callers. In summary, Fraud Aware's responsibility is to be a resource for fraud, identification, education, and prevention. Fraud Aware exists for this purpose. If we can help you identify fraud, then you are aware and you're educated. And if you are aware and educated, then we trust you will help others also to be aware and to know, prompting our communities to ask the right question at the right time and to the right people. Illegal loan pools. I would like to look at this term a little bit to make sure you understand what we're talking about. Illegal loan pools are organizations that receive investments and then turn around and loan it out to others for interest or a margin, a profit. Let's note a few marks of an illegal money pool. They often, if not always, offer loans with very little paperwork, bypassing the traditional vetting process that you're probably accustomed to. There's very little due diligence, and they're not registered as required by the state in which they operate. The seed for Fraud Aware was planted, I'm not sure when it was planted, but I will say it this way. We received a letter from an attorney. There was an attorney that worked with illegal loan pools and legal loan pools, and he was asked to come speak at an event and tell our people, a group of people, about what should and should not happen in regards to this subject. Instead, he wrote us a letter. And I'm just going to read it to you. And this, if the seed for Fraud Aware was not already planted, this letter was the fertilizer. If the seed wasn't planted, then this letter was the seed, is what I want to say. The letter goes like this. Thank you for the offer to speak at your meeting, but I will have to decline, the attorney is saying. As much as I support your effort to educate your group about the serious consequences of failing to comply with laws that govern investment activities, this message needs to come from within your own people. Then he goes on to say, having represented Anabaptist loan programs for more than 20 years, I am of the opinion that non-compliance issues do not result from a lack of understanding of the securities laws. Rather, this misconduct is intentional. The person understands that what he is doing is wrong and could result in financial harm to others, but chooses to do so anyway. Then he concludes with 2 points. He says, this behavior in illegal loan pool groups will continue unless, 1, the conservative Anabaptist churches reject their bogus excuses for failing to comply. Basically, he was saying failing to comply with the Securities and Exchange Commission law. And 2, the churches start admonishing their members for investing in illegal loan pool programs. Now, I want to say, those are his words. They're sharp. They're not mine. But they were motivational. They were concerning. The message, the takeaway is this: the message must come from within. In the past 20 years, over $300 million have been lost, gone. 10,000s of man-hours, internal man-hours, committees, ministry, late nights, deacons, families, failed businesses at times. There's service providers serving these businesses that are funded with money that stops when they fail. Then there's the external cost. There's government agencies involved when a illegal loan pool collapses. There's investigators. There's bankers. They have their attorney cost as well. There's the FBI. There's federal marshals. These people are not cheap. The cost is tremendous. But I think the most important thing, it is not the urgency, it is not the people, because there is a cost that goes beyond this. And I noticed it I think it was our second song, and I cannot recall the words, but it is the loss of Christian testimony. A failed loan pool is like dropping a pebble in the water. The ripples flow out. Eventually they do go away. That's the good news. They do go away. And the community moves on. It heals, both internally and secularly. So the question is, why would we invest? Why would we invest in an illegal loan pool? As we work with these, we notice there's a common trend, and it's called the affinity fraud factor. We trust because they're one of us. We hear it again and again. They speak our language. Most often, this is more in an old order setting, where there's bilingual other language. They speak our language, and they go to a conservative church. Why would we invest? What is the attraction? We hear these answers again and again. And just for the record, it is good to trust. We want trust in and amongst our communities, but it's equally important to verify on this subject. Why would we invest? Many are attracted to the higher interest rates. Some are risk takers. There are always those amongst us that are ready to take that moonshot for whatever is at the other end. There are those that truly need the money for past losses, and this is especially sad because sometimes life brings a chain of events that leaves a financial hole, deficit. And sometimes people try to fill it by taking a risk that indeed just causes more issues. And then there are those that don't take or spend as much time as they should in figuring out what to do next, and they are careless. I will never forget the first time I heard of a legal loan pool. I was actually living in East Africa, in the country of Ethiopia at the time, and there was some older brethren there talking. And they were talking about, they were spending years on the farm field, and so they were talking about what they did with some of their money while they were there. And this one name came to the surface, and yes, it's a good place to invest, and yes, the interest rates are good. And I remember hearing, I was off to the side, I wasn't in the conversation, and I remember hearing that and thinking, what a fool am I? My money is in the bank at 2.5% interest at the time. I never realized that 10, 12 years later, that exact name, I would spend a good portion of 1 or 2 years helping to clean up the failure. Never realized it. Why would we invest? Often verbal agreements, the handshake, things that we appreciate. Trust, but please, let's verify. The handshake, verbal agreement, no documentation or very little. Very easy to do. Why would we invest? I would just say it's the temptation of our nature. The right sequence happens, the right person presents an opportunity, and we bite. Not thinking. Is there something like a free lunch when it comes to lending money, borrowing money in this conversation? I think it's better said that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. The question is, how do we know if it's a legal loan opportunity or legal investment opportunity? To be fair, all investments have risk. That is inherent with that definition. How can we tell what is acceptable and what is not? What's higher and what's lower in terms of risk? Let's look at some red flags. First of all, not legal, not registered by Securities and Exchange Commission. There's no financial statements. That's a sign. That's a red flag. It's a one-person operator. And I think back to Jesus' words, how he gives so much advice. You pick your book, but I will pick the book of Luke. He gives so much advice about how we handle mammon. Why does he do that? It's powerful. And as a fund or managing of money grows, a one-person operator can quickly develop into a dangerous situation. We simply, as was stated, we simply are not wise enough or strong enough in and of ourselves to be accountable or strong. Above market rates, a red flag. Why would someone pay 14% when you can get money from the bank for 7%? Why? Ask yourself that question. Red flag. Green flags. They're legal. They have audited financial statements. They recognize the inherent risk that comes with investments and are ready to give you whatever information you need. There's transparency, organizational transparency. They're accountable. They have an oversight board, someone speaking in and strategically helping to guide this investment operation. And their interest rates are average. Green flags. Here's an ad. I will just read it. It may be too small to read on the screen. Real estate lending opportunity. We'll pay 14%. 12-month term preferred, but not limited to. Why would someone pay 14 instead of 7? And even with flexible terms? Easy come, easy go. It's easy go, I can tell you. Identification, the duck fraud or fraud test. If it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. The hardship stories, the impact of these failed loan pools. I know of one missionary that came back from a foreign mission field needing to start over because of a collapsed illegal loan pool. Everything they had went into there. I think it was a school fund that was invested in a loan pool that failed, and they lost it. It was a sizable amount. Someone had trusted and put it there, and it disappeared. They had to start over. That's congregational money, I assume, planning to build a school. Major health events. I know there was another loan pool that collapsed, and the impact, that pebble in the water symbolism, the impact was so great that they started a fund just for the purpose of helping those with immediate medical needs, older, singles, widows, that needed help until the local deacons could bring stability to the individual situations. $70 million missing from a community or an area is a lot of money. It leaves some holes, and it takes some time to rebuild that. And local congregations sometimes need some help from a broader circle to pull that together and find stability. Verify organizational accountability. Full disclosure, oversight, reputable is a good sign that this is a legal or a trustworthy operation. Over the years, I have asked myself, what keeps me from stumbling? Many of us are in business. And even if you serve in employment for your income, you're still doing something with your money. You're spending it, you're saving it, investing it, giving it. You're making decisions. What is between myself and this type of regret? And I think it's so critical that approachability, teachableness, and humility should only increase as the zeros behind the numbers grow. Those traits are so important. And it is interesting to note, for those of us in this room, that the kingdom of Christ comes built in with these traits. So I would like to ask, are we not doubly accountable if we indeed fail on these points in helping one another to these traits, especially as it relates to the handling of finance, investment, and lending? And borrowing again from an opening verse, Proverbs 11:14, this is the foundation, if you can see it there. The foundation of these traits, where no counsel is, the people fall. But in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. There is strength in this model. All investments have risk. We want to encourage best practices. And Jesus did tell us that we live in enemy territory where moth and rust doth corrupt, and thieves do break through and steal. That is the reality. And I will let you, on a congregational level, try to balance that reality on one hand with the other reality that Jesus commanded, that he said, I will let that who of you, when intending to build a tower, that you don't sit down first and consider the cost. So on one hand, he says, it's dangerous territory and you will lose, you're at risk. On the other hand, we're called that we plan and we strategically plan with our money and our investments. So we want to do just a little of that with 2 points here. First of all, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And this is borrowing from a phrase in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 2. Give a serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. That's one concept. Another concept is if you would feel sheepish discussing the investment with your fellow church members, you probably should avoid it. Switching gears. Scams, and more scams. Fraudware was born into the cradle that illegal loan pools created. That was the seed. That's where it started. But as we shared the message, we started hearing stories, dozens. It was a trickle at first. Then it increased and increased and increased. And suddenly we realized there's another message here waiting to be told. Scams. I personally discovered this when one of the deacons I was working with on a failed loan pool, I became good friends with him over the period of about 2 years. And we were finished that work, and I hadn't talked to him. And one day my phone rang, and he says, Loren, fraud aware, what are you doing with that? I said, well, we're trying to make so that you and I don't have to work together again like we did 2 or 3 years ago. He said, well, I have an older couple in my congregation that somehow got connected with a voice on a telephone. We don't know how long ago exactly, but suddenly we noticed there was new mortgages getting put on the property that they held. And the single middle-aged daughter, there was credit attachments happening there. Somehow, this voice on the phone had this older couple delivering $10,000 of cash to the Philadelphia Zoo parking lot in exchange for the hope of a big win. I think it was $1 million. How does that happen? Do we care? Or is there a message that needs shared? And before I forget, if your head is spinning until I'm done with this scam section, and it's fair if it is, just forget everything I said. And there's a paper back there on the table that gives you to-dos. It's a tip sheet for scams. Take that along with you, read through it, share it with someone else, and just hopefully it gives you when the next scam is presented to you. Scams, and more scams, phone scams, gift card scams, and poster scams, Internal Revenue Service, Social Security Agency, administration scams, they go on and on and on. Fake certified and washed check scams, fake invoice or purchase order scams, money wiring scams, on and on and on. Until I'm done this little piece, there'll probably be a new scam created. It never ends. I want to introduce you to scams. Scams is big business. Sometimes we don't realize that in that nasty phone call that comes in. Many scammers have well-equipped call centers. They hire a good number of employees, and they're located in other countries such as India. And I think here's where I'm going to interject. I appreciate the note made in the opening by Brother Jonathan that let's remember, sure, we get frustrated, we're fearful, but let's remember that the people on the other end of the line are not always the kingpin, if I can say it that. Their paycheck could possibly be very small. I know of one situation that in the course of conversation, the person asked the caller or the scammer, why are you doing this? And the man broke down and cried. He said, and I don't remember what country, what the situation is, but he said, it's the only way I have to put food on the table. In other words, the percentage that he earned from doing the dirty frontline work was actually very, very small. So lest we think it's humorous to play jokes on them, think again. there's also an opportunity for testimony, a testimony, that indeed they hang up that phone, they say that victim or that target is different. It's an opportunity. And I remember we lived in Ethiopia, and I was friends with a computer technician there. Asnaki was his name. And he was one of these individuals that you have an equal level of respect and fear. And I remember when this first dawned on me, one brother had brought over a beautiful laptop. It's like a $3,000 Dell Inspiron or Latitude, I forget. And for the lamp and light coursework that we did there in Ethiopia. And one Saturday I was trying to set this thing up, and it was one of the first machines with the fingerprint or the thumb reader scan years ago. This was 15 years ago. One Saturday I was trying to set this up, brand new machine, and I locked it. And it would not boot. It would not go past my thumbprint. Whatever I did was wrong. So I tried to explain it to the administrator, and he kind of said, okay, take it into my friend Asnaki. I don't think he realized how serious I had messed it up. But I went into him and said, I have a problem. Well, he looked at it, and if I remember correctly, he had 3 solutions. One was insert a piece of code that the American government would not like and catch it on boot cycle and basically allow him to reinstall the operating system. The second option was to pull out the side of the machine and go in there and snip a diode or some circuitry or something and basically violate my thumbprint, and we would have our laptop back. I forget what the third option is actually what we did. He somehow worked with the boot cycle and was able to get ahead of my fingerprint, my thumb, and get the machine working again. But what it taught me is this. Gone are the days where scamming is only available to the rich and the famous or the able. All it takes is a young, sharp mind with an average IT degree in a third world country with some cheap hardware, a good internet connection, and thousands of hours. And his power can reach across the world. That is a fact. How to get scammed. I want to show you how to get scammed. And by the way, even children get caught in scams. Here's my son getting scammed less than a month ago. He went with some cousins to a science museum center, and the employee there at the center said, here, he showed him this funnel, this toy, and he said, you can throw some pennies in this, and let's watch this happen. So he's throwing 4 pennies into this funnel, and my son's delighted. This is amazing. These pennies are racing around. He's watching them. They're not hitting each other. So he's standing there watching, having a great time, unsuspecting that the scam has started. The pennies go around, and notice something else, the speed. They're speeding up faster and faster and faster. And about right here is where he already lost control. I don't think his hand could fit down that tube. But finally, the payout has happened. There's no way to get those pennies. They're somehow locked in the bottom. I mean, I'm sure someone does, but my son wasn't going to get those pennies back. I want to use that as a symbolism of how scammers operate as we move through. 3 parts to most, if not all, scams. First of all is the connection. All they're looking to do is get a handshake, a verbal handshake, a voice on the phone that says hello and gives them the time of day. That's all they need. And they're very clever at masking and getting in the door. They can spoof your phone call or your phone number. They can spoof your email. They can hack. The tools are endless. So they get in, they say hello, and you say hello back. They connect. In multiple ways, we have these methods. And phone calls are still the number 1 method of connecting, according to my knowledge. It is dropping some as messaging increases and voice becomes less. Scammers also have to adapt. They're good at their business. Text messaging and email is rising. I heard just recently someone posted something online, and instantly, within seconds, they had someone messaging them. You know that's not a person out there looking for your online advertisement. And of course, the mail is still happens some, but very, very little. And in person, did you know if you are a scammer and your victim goes quiet on you, you can call the local police, they will help you. Or pizza delivery, they will help. Serious. In our area, there was an older brother that over the period of years and a series of steps was getting drawn in by a scammer. And finally, the brotherhood became aware of this and said, hey, we can help you here a little bit with this. So they had some conversation, and finally this older brother stopped answering the phone. He would not answer for the scammer. What does the scammer do? He calls the local police department and says, I have a friend at so-and-so address that I need you to do a wellness check on. So yeah, the local police drove out, knocked on the door, checked on him. Yes, indeed, he's well. He went. The older brother still did not answer the phone at a later time. So what does he do? He orders pizza delivery, delivers it to the front door, and yes, indeed, someone showed up at the door, took the pizza, confirmed. His target is still there, he's still living, apparently still eating, or we hope. The point is, in person is less and less. The second part to every scam is they convince. And remember those pennies starting around the circle. My son was connected when the museum employee said, here, you want to play with this game? Sure, 4 pennies. And it went. He connected. But then there's a convincing process, and things start speeding up at this point. If the scammer can get you past the connection, it will start speeding up. The clock or time is the enemy of a scammer. And very soon, he will start presenting problems that require immediate attention, urgency, such as an unpaid bill, a compromised account, things that we care about and that create pressure within us. They use commonly trusted influences. They hijack trust. Government officials, law enforcement. Currently, border control is a big subject in our nation, so that's a label that gets used to cause fear and to speed this process up of convincing. Grandchildren, uncle, aunt, relatives, they'll use anything that we may know to try to capture us, to convince us. Hijacking trust, then they create fear. They may call and say, we intercepted a parcel that's coming to your door today. Do you have a parcel coming today? And they may or may not know that. And if you do, you say yes. Do not answer the door. There's drugs in that package. And there's criminals waiting for that parcel to be delivered to your front door. Do not go out. And then they start the process of convincing. Your life's in danger. Maybe a past due bill, accident, relative in jail. The list goes on. The stories are many. False reasons to act immediately. If someone calls and says something bad will happen, take a pause. You will lose all your money. Take a pause. You will go to jail if you do not act now. Just slow it down. You will lose your computer data. Fear, they also work on creating desire. Now, I would hope this threat isn't quite as great within God's kingdom as it is in secular society. But at the end of the day, we will admit that we can be weak at times. It's a grand prize. It's a free car. I remember once there was a young man that they called him and said, we have a free car for you. And he said, that's fine. Deliver it to my home address. Just let me know when it's there. And the conversation went on. And after a while, oh, yes, they did need a $900 fee for shipping. If it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. And then here's the final step. The scammer charges. After all, he needs a paycheck too. He's for his job. And this is where the tension just gets tighter. It's the handshake. Then it's the convincing, and it starts speeding up. And things just aren't quite making sense. Remember those 4 pennies flying around? They didn't collide, but often deep within the heart of every target or every victim, something isn't right. But it speeds up so fast emotionally that they struggle to get ahead of it logically. The scammer may use threats or promises to ensure compliance. He will use both sides and use them so fast that you're hardly even aware what's happening. But finally, as the pennies tighten in the tube, it speeds up and they get their payout, if they're successful. There's 3 forms of payout, major forms: electronic transfers, cash, or gift cards. The top method is electronic transfers. There's multiple methods here. And the Federal Trade Commission says bank transfers are number 1 and rising. Cash is the second form. Agree in advance. It is good to have an agreement, a pre-thought-out agreement with your spouse or your money matters partner, whoever that is in your life. You each should have one. Someone that you have talked about this danger in a practical way before it happens. Someone that you can trust. This is just general guidance. Pick your own numbers that fit to whatever your risk tolerance is. This is another form of cash. Bitcoin and crypto scams I put under the cash category because ultimately it follows similar methods. Bitcoin ATM is not a safety locker. It will not get your money safe like scammers tell you. You're going to lose your money. Go save it. Feed it in this machine. And there's a story fabricated to make it happen. In fact, I'm told that there were two couples that lost more than $30,000 combined in cash to this type of Bitcoin ATM scam. And don't ask me to explain how this even works. I don't have that understanding. But they sell a concept that feeding money in will save that money from loss. Stop. Is the money really going where you think it's going? The third form of payment is a seemingly innocent tool that many of us use, a gift card. They've hijacked it, and they use it for scam payment. This method rose in 50% in 2023. Thousands of cases were reported. More than $210 million have been verified as loss, and the Federal Trade Commission says that's probably only 5%. You do the math. The number is off the charts. Very conservatively, we can say $1 million lost yesterday, $1 million lost today, and $1 million lost tomorrow. This is a bleeding payment. If you forget everything else I say tonight, I would be satisfied if you go home with these 5 words in your memory. Gift cards are for gifts. In fact, if I could just share with you the pain, the loss, the shame, the blush of spouses, of brothers, sisters, when they come home and say, my credit cards are full, and I just got rid of $2,500. They're not huge losses, but the personal effect is also costly. The damage of trust or what that can mean. I'm doing a lot of talking here this evening, but I would like to ask for your help on these 5 words. Can you say with me, at least once, gift cards are for gifts? Please remember that. It is no joke. One story I remember recently, I was at a seminar, and this one man came up and he said, yes, that's a legit issue. He said, I got a call from my sister. Yes, my brother called my sister. He was coming back from buying gift cards, and his credit cards are full. So he called our sister for her credit cards. He needed to buy more because his computer was flashing lights and giving him messages, and this was going to save his hard drive. He was, I think, $2,500 into it, and he was getting ready to tap his sister. Now, thankfully, that sister called another brother, and remember, the cycle of convincing, and actually his partial payout, started slowing. And these scammers will basically take a paying customer, and they will go until he stops paying. There's no stopping. They're good. They have all the time in the world. If there's credit cards and if there's gift cards, more gift cards available, more PIN numbers to be handed across the phone, then go for it. Grandchild scams. Can I see a raise of hands? How many grandparents do we have here this evening? Okay, quite a few. Okay, so this is in place. They call, and it's a child, a grandchild, a relative in trouble. Hospital, doctor, they're in jail, they made a foolish decision, they're guilty, they're sorry, whatever the story is, we need some money. Get a second opinion. Ask your Money Matters partner for help. And by the way, forget the day of being able to tell who it is by the sound of their voice. If your loved one has any verbal documentation on the internet, Facebook, audio, film, forget being able to identify who it is. Anymore, a person in a little hole in the wall shop across on the other side of the globe can capture that and clone your loved one's voice and present that through the phone line. Don't trust the voice. Email scams. How many of you have heard from the Prince of Nigeria before? I'm curious. Can I see a raise of hands? Okay, I wasn't sure. I didn't know that if that was an older scam, and I might show my age and be talking out of class here. There's a few. Okay, let's look at this. I will let you read it yourself for the sake of time. What are the red flags? Do you know him? I just saw a few hands, so some of you know this gentleman. But were you expecting his contact? Red flag number 2. Is 40% a regular payout for this kind of helping? Or is that too good to be true? Number 3, asking for personal information. Never give your personal information to strangers. And the next Netflix password, how does that fit the context here? Another example, how many factual assurances do you have that these people are who they say they are? They're ready to insure you and every other person, et cetera, et cetera. What factual assurance? Secrecy. Again, violating the principle where no counsel is, the people fail. Details matter. Notice the exclamation mark in the period. Now, granted, if you read some of my emails, you may say red flag number 1. But I do want to say scammers are getting so good, you cannot rely on this one as a standalone. And then finally, the emotional hook. I want to say the emotional hook is not in and of itself a clear sign. We face emotional appeals all day long. In advertising, in sales, we're used to that. But when the emotional hook is coupled with another sign, it becomes a sign in and of itself. Recently, an older businessman talked about how powerful a scam artist is. He had received or was the subject of a blackmail attempt where he received an email with an illegal accusation with a payout at the end. And he said it took him minutes to shake the fear. Now, this is a mature and well-seasoned brother, but it took him minutes, 15 minutes or more, to shake the fear and regain a logical view of the accusation. Scam artists have perfected the emotional hook. If they haven't, they're flipping burgers somewhere. If the scam artist can anchor his emotional hook with a barb of guilt, which that is possible sometimes, his probability of success improves dramatically. Think before you link. Take your time. Ask someone. Find a money matters partner. Older folks, consider a younger. Younger, consider an older. Friend, relative, accountant, bankers, spouses should be in on this conversation. In the multitude of counselors, there is indeed safety. Now, a few tools for your toolbox. Most electronic scams are preventable because we can slow them down, verify, and don't ask the scammer for a verification phone number. He will be glad to give you one. Just reaching his coworker 2 doors down the hall, ready to assure you that, yes, send your money, it's great. Stop. Is the money going where you think it's going? Most email hacks are preventable. There's multiple ways. It's 2-step verification, third-party spam filters, strong passwords, and make sure you have a good voice to speak into your technical world so that you're wise as a serpent. User awareness. Be careful with free. Some people live by the saying, if it's free, I'll take 3, but this can get us in trouble with computers and software. Be aware that free always has a cost, and fraudsters in the digital world are looking for those who love free. Free is never free. It only changes when and how you pay. Electronics. I have a friendly feud with an older businessman for over a decade that he declares his computer can change settings at will, and I maintain that it does not. But if your computer or your device is doing something you don't understand, ask a trusted advisor to help you. Confirm before changing payment methods. Recently, an employer said he received an employee that said he was to change his direct deposit bank account information for his paycheck. Thankfully, the employer stepped down the hall and asked the employee, so how did you choose this bank? And the employee looked back at the employer and said, bank? Here his email had been hacked, and that employee's next paycheck just about ended up in a very secure bank account, probably in Nigeria. Remember who is asking and who is answering. These calls come, they grip us. Remember who's asking and who is answering. Remember that the first fraud in history ended with a question mark. Yea, hath God said? Does that sound familiar? Do not let the burden of proof shift to your side of the conversation. What is my date of birth, my address, my phone number? Have the caller tell you what those are. Do not answer questions from strangers. It did not work for in the Garden of Eden, and it probably will not work for you. Do not trust a tool for your toolbox. Do not trust these methods of ID. Every one of them can be hacked or spoofed. Check your bank accounts, know what's going on, and report quickly and immediately. Second opinion. You know, we're accustomed to second opinions in many areas of our lives, but somehow finances come along slow. It's common in healthcare. We do it with verification on devices. Find someone that you can reach out to that you trust and have an ongoing relationship. Honoring the principle, again, in the multitude of counselors, there's safety. If someone says you must stay on the phone with them, you may not talk to anyone about the call. You must act immediately. This is very urgent, or you will be in trouble if you do not obey them. Hang up. They can always call back if it's any different. And recently I did have a situation where a PUC officer was trying to contact a company that I represented and a couple times, and she got a little urgent. And I apologized after we met face to face. I said, I really thought something would come through the mail. But she was legitimate. But she was also very patient. She said, we recognize the industry is being hammered with this type of activity. Prevention. Simply hang up. Seek a second opinion. Can you help me out? What's this third one? Let's say it together. Gift cards are for gifts. Thank you. Consult a trusted expert. And the multitude of counselors concept. And if it seems too good to be true, just slow those pennies down. Grab them quick, because you're losing time. Time is a wasting. Please feel free to visit the literature table. I know some of you have seen it already. We have a mailing list sign-up sheet back there you're welcome to get. We have a literature order sheet if you want additional literature. There's books. There's a tips for scam prevention. In conclusion, awareness as a community. It's very easy on this subject to start pointing fingers there, here, over there. Awareness as a community, we are better together with fraud. Older folks can guide the younger with their use and understanding of technology specifically. Younger can help the older work with it as well as they navigate its complexities. Spouses must be there for each other, lest a fraudster trap a loved one in a process that only ends in shame and regret. Fraud is more than mammon. It's more than just a loss of money. It's a breach of trust that shakes the core of a community, the foundation of one's confidence in themselves and others. Again, let's bring compassion to the job as we relate to fraud actors on one side or victims on the other side. What goes through your mind when you hear of someone trapped by fraud? Why? I have to be honest, that comes to my mind. Really? Or do we think, as one person said when he heard about others that lost lots of money in illegal loan pools, he said, the fat cats got the haircuts they deserved. Let's bring compassion. Let's remember two principles: pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall. And wherefore, let him that thinketh he standeth take heed, lest he also fall. May grace, mercy, and truth guide our efforts as we work with fraud in and amongst our communities. In conclusion, Fraud Aware is a conservative Anabaptist resource for fraud identification, education, and prevention. Fraud Aware envisions a future where fewer ambulance crews are needed to help resolve failed illegal loan pools. A future where a generation does not need to know the pain, the damage to Christian testimony, and the loss of resources through fraud. A future where more of our people are aware and asking the right question at the right time and to the right people. Fraud Aware believes we can do better. Thank you.